We're not, well, I'm not a visitor anymore. I'm part of Logsdon family, and it's good to see you. And those we did not meet, I hope that we can meet and get to know each other. Just need to work out the details of the technology. Is it up or, I'm sorry. I just need to have faith that this is it's working. Okay. I come from a very small minority, very small not of group of people. Actually, when we are a minority within a minority within a minority. I'm Arab, and as an Arab, I'm a minority in the state of Israel among the majority of Jewish people. I belong to a Christian group, and the Christians are a minority among the Arabs. As an evangelical, evangelicals are a minority among the Christians. And in each of these levels, I've shared that over and over. We do have our challenges. Actually, not challenges. Challenges is an easy word. We have serious pressure. And as a small minority, sometimes it's easier to think, how can we survive? What means we need to take? What strategy we need to have in order to survive? But for us, as evangelicals in Israel and in the Middle East, this is not our strategy. Our strategy is, how can we serve? Not to survive, but to serve. We're called to serve, not to survive. And when I think about serving, I'm not thinking about how can I serve my church only. I'm not thinking about how can I serve my people, Christian Arabs only. But when I think about serving, my main question, how can I serve those who persecuted us for 14th century? How can I serve those who took our lands and made most of our people refugees living in the neighboring country? How can I show them love? And the theme of your chapel this year has matched very much our approach of humility and courage. And one of the major groups that have been suffering from for many centuries are the Muslims. And for many Christian people, they developed several walls, not a nice word, the walls. You need to come to the West Bank and see how walls separate families from each other, make life difficult. We manage as evangelicals to build walls between us and the rest of the society among us. These walls of, let's say, fear, walls of unforgiveness, and even walls of hatred. But God is calling us to be light and to cross over these boundaries that has been built through different people and different circumstances over the centuries. God is calling us also as a church in Israel, Palestine, and as a college that leading and teaching and training future pastors and leaders. How can we do these things? How can we face these people that persecuted us, that caused us much fear in our life and persecution during the histories? And one of these groups are the Muslims, of course. And when we think about Muslims, Many people connect Islam with the Arabs. Not all, although the majority of the Arabs are Muslims, but not all the Arabs are Muslims. Actually, the biggest Islamic country in the world is not an Arab country. It's Indonesia. So, Arab Christians has been living as a minority for many centuries in the Islamic settings. And the numbers were declined actually for over these centuries. They were a majority before the 7th century to be a minority, maybe only a 5% in the recent days. And God knows what the situation right now because of the persecution in Iraq and Syria, and we don't have any numbers. But anyway, our numbers is very small. And this small number of Arabs who are living in the Holy Land has been Christians for centuries. So we're not visitors in the Holy Land. We're not strangers to the Holy Land. We're the people who lived there for many years. Sometimes we experience difficulties with the Muslim majority. I mean, during centuries, some periods were nicer, and Christians enjoyed maybe a peaceful time. But when we speak about Islam, and this is important, I'm speaking about our experience, our struggles. When we speak about the issue of how Christians should approach Muslims, I'm not speaking about distant issue for me. I'm not speaking about theoretical issue here, or simply a political issue or opinions that are expressed in the media. We are speaking about our daily reality, how we connect to these people, that we live among them every day. And the way we want to approach our relation with the Muslim is an approach of peaceful and reconciling approach. It's not easy, but this is actually, who said that a message of the gospel is an easy message? What God is calling us, when God is calling us to live our enemies, it's easy to say this and read it and teach it when you're not facing any persecution or not facing any enemy in your surrounding. But what happens if you're really living with people that has been classified as your enemy for centuries? God is calling us to love, to have peace with these people. Of course, when I speaking about peaceful approach, I'm not speaking about compromising approach. I'm not saying that we should compromise our faith, our convictions. No, not at all. I'm not saying to have peace with others, that means that we should compromise our values and ethics and morals. In fact, actually what we're doing our best to base our response to Muslim neighbors precisely on our Christian faith. We're not calling for a when we want to have a peaceful approach to Muslims, it does not mean that we should have a compromising approach. Also, sorry. Let's jump to another one. Our approach is also to build bridges with the rest of the community. I mean, we're living in a very difficult times in our area. We're in our country, only I don't want to go to Syria and Iraq. Our communities are living together, but they are living apart from each other. And our call as Christians is to try to reach out and build relation with these people. We are called to understand, to connect with our neighbors. Even if we disagree with them, our goal is to build bridges. And this needs courage. I'm speaking because we're attacked often by our fellow evangelicals in our countries, that we should separate ourselves from the people around us. And to take this step, to take that step of trying to build relation and build bridges with the others that we call them, it needs humility and it needs courage to build bridges. It needs some efforts from us. It needs requires from us to understand the others. And although we lived with the Muslims for many centuries, but we managed, as I've mentioned in the beginning, to separate ourselves to a point that we don't understand them very well. But we're calling especially for our students and our members in the churches, telling them that we should have the effort to understand our Muslim neighbor, what they believe, what they think about the different issues. And of course, this is not only relevant to the people in the Middle East, it's becoming a relevant issue to the people in the whole West. My son is living and studying in Germany, in Berlin. And he's involved in Christian ministry too, and one of his service as a Christian ministry is reaching out for the refugees. There's 1 million probably refugee in Germany, 10 million, no, 1 million refugee in Germany, and 100,000 in Berlin where he's living. And most of these refugees are Muslims. How do you connect with them? In the past, the Western Church invested millions of dollars and 10,000 of missionaries to send them to the Middle East. Now the Middle East is coming to the West, and you find yourself surrounded by Muslims. How do you relate to them? How do the church in Palestine and Israel relate to the people that they're afraid from? I think we should understand them. Understanding Islam. What do you imagine when you think about Muslim? Just take a second or two. Just think. When I say a Muslim, what do you have in mind? Let me guess. Violence. Some of you think that. Terrorism. Religion that oppresses women. Or maybe certain kind of dresses. Those to be nicer. But a Muslim might be any of these. Muslim might be liberal, might be Sufi, might be Salafist, might be Sunni, might be Shia, might be traditional. Just think with me. I'll just make it quicker. It's a long one. As we're different as Christians. What would you like people to classify you as? What? As fanatic Christian, fundamentalist evangelical, liberal evangelical, Lutheran, Anglican, Catholic, Greek Catholic, and each of these groups are different than each other. So when we speak about Islam, we're not speaking about one kind of people. They're different people. They're different people. As we are different people. As we are created in the image of God, also they are created in the image of God. Other issue of Islam that we need to deal with, maybe not here as much as we deal with it in our area, violence. Of course, especially with what's happening around us in the last 5 or 6 years, it's a big question. The relation of Islam with violence. Islam does have a violence issue in it. But most of those who were suffering from Islam were Muslims. Of course, Christians suffered very much lately from from extremist Muslims, but the most of those who suffered from ISIS were actually were Muslims themselves. Yes, in my opinion, there is a violence problem in Islam, but it's not a simple matter. Nonetheless, even here we need to be careful not to exaggerate or oversimplify this issue. It's like if we insist that the violence in Islam is profound there, it's in every Muslim, we need to explain a simple fact that more than 1 billion Muslims in the world now, and many of these people Christians living among them, but they're not attacking them every day. So yes, there is a problem of violence in Islam, but not every Muslim is adopting this thing. And I'll come to this point in a minute later before I finish. Another thing we should think when we think about Islam, we should try to understand the issue of Islam, violence. The other thing that how Muslims perceive or understand view Christians. And this is sometimes, usually you don't think about it. History is still alive for many Muslims, by the way. The issue of the Crusaders who invaded the Middle East and killed many Muslims, many Christians, by the way, and many Jews, is still an issue for Islam and for Muslims when they think about their relation with the Christians. Do you remember when Mr. Bush spoke about invading Iraq? He used the word crusade. And they said, okay, here, that's what we were saying all our lives, Muslims. Christians want to conquer our land. Even the Crusaders are coming back again to the Middle East. Of course, it did not mean this kind of crusades, but this is something that Muslims think about all the time. They think that the Christians, if they're giving the potential, they will overrule again over them, and they will actually probably persecute them. Also, it's very important to understand that Islam think about communities. They look at America as a Christian place. They look at all the Christians in the Middle East as they are the representative of the Christian faith, whether they're atheist people or believing people. So they look at us, and this is very big responsibility, and say, this is Christianity. They look at the Hollywood production and say, this is Christianity. It's probably very strange for us to hear, but this is, they tend to look at people, at us as communities, and say, this is what is Christianity. And we need to understand these issues. And do we really want the sense of the distant past or the worst element of Western cultures today to be taken as representative of Christianity? When we think about Islam, when we listen to a Muslim, do we want him to judge us by the worst things that Christianity did? Of course, we don't want that. So why we're returning that to them in a different way? Why we're treating them, taking the worst thing that's happening among the Muslims and judging all Muslims by this? Is this the way that we're taught to treat others as we wish that they will treat us with? This is a very challenging issue. Again, it might be not relevant for you, but it's a daily issue for us. How do we survive these issues in the Middle East? And this is, again, needs humility and needs courage. I'm trying to go quickly here to finish on time. So what's the way ahead? Of course there is problems. And of course it's obvious that there is a lot of serious challenges here between in the relations, the way we view. But what is the way ahead for us as followers of Christ? How can we behave in a way that we bring hope, not only to the relations, but we bring hope to the Muslims themselves? What is the way that we can open their eyes to see that Christianity is different? I think it depends very much on our approach, and what we should do here is following Jesus' steps. It's just in the first century. I'll take one back. I'm confused. At the first century, Jesus lived in a very difficult situation. The whole Jewish nation was under the brutal control and occupation of the Romans. At the same time, the Jewish community had a group of Samaritans who are kind of their enemies, who lived inside the same communities or in the same geographical place. And how did Jesus deal with these things? He dealt with a lot of humility and courage, welcoming everyone, accepting everyone, not focusing on the wrongs only of the others, but bringing hope and giving hope for the others. If we think about Jesus' model of Christ put in front of us today, it's not an easy one, for sure. It can be costly. But this is what we are called. This is what is very much needed for us as a church in the Middle East. My wife grew up in Bethlehem, and during her teenage, it was the uprising. At that time, a lot of curfews, schools were closed for 2 years. People were shot daily. She herself and her sister got rubber bullets in their legs. And such an atmosphere, it's very easy for a teenager to develop hatred and bitterness. And that did in her life. Until many years later, when she was serving in the church, and this uprising was with the Jews, not with the Muslims. When she started to serve in a school and teach Bible, God really touched her heart and opened her, and just was touching her heart and convicting her to forgive. If we need to go ahead, and it wasn't easy for her, because she remembered all the years that she suffered very much. But she knew that if she wants to go ahead and be a light in her community, she needs to forgive. She needs to remember that the teaching that God is telling her to represent, teaching of love, forgiveness. And this took a lot of humility and courage in her life. Our call is not to debate or even focus on the evil groups acting in the name of Islam, but rather to represent Jesus truly, powerfully to the people, to the Muslim people. We're not called to win the argument, but we're called to win the people. This is a message that God put on my heart, and simply because we're going through it right now. These last few years, this was the big question for the church in the Middle East. How do we relate to our Muslim neighbors? Is it approach of love, forgiveness, humility and courage, or bitterness, unforgiveness and hatred? It's a question that we all have to answer in these dark days that we're living in. Thank you very much.